Hey everybody! The other day, got a message from a friend of mine in college. And he basically said, hey, it's quarantine. It's also going to be my birthday on Saturday, and I just want to get together with the old roommates. And it was actually, the group text, and so we all started kind of going back and forth and making jokes and things like that and saying, okay, yeah, we're going to hang out on Saturday at 8 p.m. on Zoom. It's going to be great. And I'm pumped about it. And it was going to be really fun. But honestly, there had to come a point in the conversation with like, hey guys, I'm like super excited about this. This is going to be fun. But I don't know who all is in this group text thread. I'm sorry. I'm going to need your names. Who is this? And it was one of those moments of like, haha, okay, yeah, good call. And the guy who texted me, I had his number. And there was another one whose number I had, but then there were a couple other guys who I didn't have their numbers saved in my phone. I kind of felt bad because I was trying to think, oh, these were guys that I knew in college, and I enjoyed spending time with them, but I did not have their phone number. Now maybe their number has changed or something like that, and I had it at one point and then I lost it, but it definitely got me thinking, how close am I to these buddies of mine if I don't have their number in my phone? And I don't know about you guys, but there definitely comes a time when you figure out, okay, I am good friends with this person, and I am not so good friends with that person over there. And this week, we're going to talk about that a little bit when we talk about quiet time. Now, what I mean by quiet time isn't just, is there any time where there's no noise? Because I don't know about your house, but at my house, there's hardly any time when it's actually quiet between three girls and some projects that we're doing around our house and music we've got blasting all the time to working out to just having fun. Quiet at my house is a precious commodity. It's not something that happens all the time. And maybe you feel like that too. Maybe you do that on purpose. Maybe you don't like just quiet time when there's not any music and you've got your earphones in all the time, or you've got, noise, or maybe you're just making the noise by yourself just to not be quiet. Now, it's funny is when you think about a quiet time, what we're talking about is a spiritual discipline of getting away and spending focused time with God. Focused time with God. And Jesus, even in his time when he was here on earth, when there were no cell phones, when there was no TV, when there were no screens or music blasting everywhere to take away our attention, even Jesus in that time felt the need to get away and have quiet time. Check out Luke 5:15 through 16. But now, even more, the report about him went abroad, and great crowds gathered to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. Now this is crazy. What's happening here is more and more people are hearing about Jesus. They're hearing about his miracles. They're hearing about how he heals people. They're hearing about all the great things he does. And since more and more people hear about him, more and more people are coming to him and trying to find him, making it hard for Jesus to get time that's quiet by himself. And in this passage, time to pray. And even though these crowds are gathering around him, we're told that he would withdraw. He would, on purpose, go away to desolate places. Think desert. Think places where nobody else would want to go, or just where the people aren't at that moment. And Jesus would take that time and pray. Then there's another part in John 6, verse 15. It says, perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. In this passage, Jesus had just multiplied bread. He had fed this huge crowd. And the guy who can make lots of bread out of a little bread and lots of fish out of a few fish, those people want that guy to be king because he can do great miracles and he can feed everybody. What a great king that would be. That's an awesome superpower. But Jesus says he perceived that. And he didn't want to be king in the way that they wanted him to be king. So instead of going with the crowd, he withdrew to a mountain by himself. I don't know if you've ever done much hiking or gone on many hikes where you end up on a mountain, but there's not a lot of time when you're on top of a mountain and then all of a sudden you're like, boom, city. Mountains normally are places that are quiet because they're not people up there. Now, great, yeah, they're mountain towns and things like that, and that's cool, and you could make an argument for Denver or whatever you wanted to talk about. But the idea here is that Jesus went to a place where there was intentionally not a lot of people. And there, he prayed. He was by himself. Now for us, a quiet time is a time for us that we can regroup. Maybe take time to think about our thoughts, to pray, to read a Bible, and to hear from God. So like we talked about last week, how to pray, that's something that you can do in a quiet time, is have a prayer. Now, let's talk a bit about why we need a quiet time. Because it's valid. You need to know why we should do a thing. I'm not just going to tell you, you should have a quiet time just cause, because there are actually some really great reasons to have some time where you're alone by yourself hearing from God. Why should you have a quiet time? Well, the first reason is just to grow your relationship with God. The more time you spend with God in quiet time, the more your relationship with Him will grow. Just like my buddies who were texting me, I haven't spent a lot of time with them over the last few years. Because of that, I didn't have their numbers in my phone. Our relationship had gotten strained. Now we could jump right back in and be like, oh yeah, I remember you. We used to room together in college. We had a really great relationship. But if I'm not investing in that relationship over and over and over again, well then that relationship's not going to grow. It'll shrink. So having time where you are purposefully spending time with God will help grow your relationship with God. And that's huge. Second, it'll help you reflect on the work God has done in your life. It'll help you take a moment just to say, oh, you know, if I stop right now, I can think about what God has done for me or even in my life. I can maybe take some time to connect the dots or put the puzzle together and go, oh, I see what God has been doing in my life over the last couple days or weeks or years, just by taking some time to reflect, to stop, and to think how you might be being impacted by God. The next is to know the story of God's redemption. Now here's what's great. The more you spend time reading the Bible and looking over the stories that are in the Bible, the more time you'll see that they're actually all one big story about how God takes a people who are far from Him and brings them close to Him, and how that story of redemption is thread all throughout Scripture. But what's really cool is if you do that, and you're taking time to read God's Word and look at the story of redemption, you can also see how your story is God redeeming you. God taking you from a place where you were far from Him and bringing you to a place where you're close to Him. And you can see the people that God's been putting in your lives and the circumstances that God's been using in your life to bring you close to Him. But normally that only happens in moments when you pause and reflect and think about what God is doing in your life. Which kind of brings us to this last part. It's the idea that we want to live a life that looks like Jesus. We want to live how Jesus lived. And Jesus, even though he is God, spent time while he was here as a human to go and be with God, to reflect, to pray. And if we're going to take time in our lives to model what Jesus did, one of the things Jesus did was to get alone by himself and to reflect and pray. We should have a quiet time. It should be a part, because having a quiet time connects us to God. And it's something we definitely need more of in our lives. So next week, we're going to talk more about how we have a quiet time. And so I'm just going to give you a few things this week of what you can do. And in fact, down below in the comments, you'll see this document that the same kind of way we've been using about how to pray and how you can pray each and every day. I'm going to give you a guided time for quiet time. And so I'm not going to go over how you pray. We talked about that last week, and if you need to review it, go and look at the video. Go and look at those two and get a refresher. But I'm going to ask you to look over that and just commit. Commit some time. And don't be overzealous here, okay? You might say, oh, I'm going to be super spiritual and I'm going to spend an hour alone with God. That doesn't necessarily make you more spiritual. If you already have a quiet time, you know how much time you spend. If you have no time whatsoever, and that this is now the moment when you're going to start committing to have some quiet time with God, that's fine. That's great, in fact. Commit to 5 minutes. Set a timer on your phone. Play one song if the actual quiet bothers you so much. A worship song that's 5 minutes long. Just to give you a time to say, you know what, I'm going to commit 5 minutes. And it might be in the morning, it might be at night, it might be at lunchtime, whenever works for you. That's great. But just commit to some time. And while you're having that time, pray. And I'll give you some things that you can pray for and about, and I'll put that in each day, how you can think about what that might look like for you. But have some time to commit to pray, and then just reflect. Reflect on what this time can do for you. Reflect on what God has done for you, just like we talked about. Reflect on the redemption of God's people and the redemption God's doing in your own life. This is huge. Don't miss this. The more you commit to connecting with God, the more you'll feel connected to God. So I'm going to spend some time with my buddies this next week, and it's going to be great. And maybe even after starting this small time of Zoom and laughing and hanging out together, that might be a chance for me to reconnect with some of my buddies. If you had a quiet time a long time ago and you fell out of the habit, it's okay to reconnect. God's not going to be disappointed that you want to get back to spending time with Him. I promise. Commit. Pray. Reflect. It's going to be great. Hey, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. This has been another conversation on Unplugged Spiritual Disciplines, connecting to God in an over-connected world. We will see you guys next week.